Welcome to this class on the final statement about the consequences of CSR in the social business. Fruitful social conflict. How can this CSR in the core business be brought about? We have seen that CSR has the citizens as a stakeholder, as adversaries. There is people in corporations, there is some conservative view that is skeptical about CSR. But if we think of CSR as the accountability of work, maybe we can identify other forgotten stakeholders that would have an interest in CSR coming about and negotiating it and making it a statement and an element of negotiation and generate some fruitful social conflict. We have said accountability is for all, accountability of work as a general statement for CSR. When it becomes for all organizations, we say accountability is for all. So, take an example of a 23 million jobs industrial economy. Okay? So, now we map all workers, all the employed people in an economy, in a society, and see how they fare vis-a-vis accountability, vis-a-vis responsibility. How do we map that? We map that by sector, as we saw, and by their exposure to competition. So in this 23 million economy, we have 23 million jobs economy, we have 16% who are in government. 16% of the working population is in government, in non-competitive sectors. We have 11% which is in monopolistic industry. We have 13%, I think, which is in large corporations, and we have 60% who is in small and medium enterprise. And we plot these on the right-hand side, so as subject to a lot of competition and therefore mostly accountable to the people and to society. We then identify what I call the competitive divide. Cutthroat competition is where there is no competition and the evasion of work is likely to manifest. I think these four groups are divided by a so-called competitive divide, just to mimic the better-known digital divide. And there is an area of work which is, as we have seen, 13% plus 11%, which makes nearly 1/4, that is 24% of the economy, non-subject to competition. And there is something at stake here. There is money at stake because we can quantify what is at stake if we think of the compensations in the non-competitive sectors. Here we see that there is compensations. The compensations in the non-competitive sectors take a larger share of the total vis-a-vis the share of employment that they have. So in this 23 million economy, there is about $100 billion or between $100 billion and 100 billion pounds at stake of overcompensation of people who work in the monopolistic sectors. It is important to gain a grasp of the overall reservoir that is there for corporate social responsibility to give account for. So we have an industry that can work and bring home about 100 billions of accountability and work on that. So that is interesting. I find that interesting. Also, we have to think that this divide, that the competitive divide, is a totally different divide from the other administrative or ideological divides that are in society. We can see that it is different from the public-private distinction, because you don't need privatization to generate competition, to generate accountability. It is different from the capital-labor classical Marxian conflict. It is different from the employee versus management. It is different from left and right. The accountability, the competitive divide cuts across these administrative and ideological divides to give us new light into the stagnation, I think, of our economies. So, how can we come out of this? How can we generate demand? How can the accountability of work, how can the CSR in the core business we want to come about, how can this happen? How can we generate demand for accountability? Workers subject to competition are the stakeholders of accountability throughout the economy, because they are already accountable. So they can be stakeholders for all the economy to become accountable. So they can generate this social dynamic. So far, this has not been the case. That is why new public management has remained an intellectual exercise, a political exercise, without actual stakeholders, without masses of people behind. Things don't happen. That is why also liberalizations are and abolishment of monopolies are at risk in southern Europe at the beginning of the second decade of this century, because liberalization may risk, is actually risking being an operation of professors without the awareness of the millions, of the majority of workers who work in the economy, who are subject to competition, but who are not supporting this movement towards liberalization. So, what this demand for accountability can generate? It can generate accountability on the side of the monopolistic sectors. We don't need privatization to generate accountability. The responsibility report. Work not subject to competition should be accounted for by tracking its international performance in a responsibility report. Obviously, the responsibility report is the end of it. The actuality is that the performance of government, the performance of public administration must be improved, must go up. The performance of public administration must go up. But this will not happen unless there are millions of stakeholders, millions of customers, millions of citizens, millions of workers who ask for it. This is an important way. And this is one way also to generate a new equality. This way, the divisive message of the global compact can be balanced. Neglected values identify new stakeholders and balance the global compact for equality among citizens and workers. We saw the divisive message of the global compact was shown in this chart by the upper arrow going from left to right, and we have generated a balancing force, a balancing arrow that goes from right to left, that is the demand for accountability. I think this way we can generate equality, we can generate justice. That is what is at stake here, equality of workers vis-à-vis their working conditions in the world. As a homework, you can run the stats of your own country, how many employed people, how many millions of employed people are there in your own country. How would you define, how would you divide these workers, these employed people by sector and vis-à-vis their being subject to competition and therefore being accountable or not. That is an interesting piece of work, and I'd be mostly interested in seeing your results and collaborating with you. Read again chapter 9, which is about the trade, about working with corporate social responsibility. Read what you have not read so far. This is a good opportunity. Check out what new public management is. I have mentioned this strand of reform. Do some research on that and make yourself aware of what it is. It's important that we square the overall numbers in the economy, because oftentimes we say everybody and we don't know how many. We have to say how many. And it is important that we run the numbers of people, we run the numbers of compensations, as we have done in this class. Thank you very much.